Tom Pisello, the ROI Guy.
Hi, this is April Morley. I'm co-founder of Genius Drive and the Enterprise Value Collective.
And welcome to the Value Coffee Talk podcast.
This podcast is a service of the Enterprise Value Collective, a community for business value-focused leaders and practitioners, and is sponsored by our value consultancy, Genius Drive.
And our mission is to help accelerate and optimize value articulation in each of your customer engagements and throughout your customer lifecycle. And we have a very special guest today, Kathryn Landis. She's the CEO and founder of Kathryn Landis Consulting. And that helps organizations accelerate success by empowering growth-minded leaders and their teams with executive coaching, team coaching, offsites, and leadership development training. And she herself has led different teams in sales, marketing, and sales operations and coaching. And she's done that with some of the best CEOs and CROs that I know personally have leveraged Kathryn. She's got a really unique perspective that we're going to dive into today. And this is something that we haven't covered yet on the Value Coffee Talk podcast. And that's around teams and how the right teams can help you to drive commercial success. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so we're going to dive right into it. Why is it so vital for commercial leaders to focus on building and cultivating great teams?
Absolutely. I'm sure your listeners are thinking, teams, what does that have to do with value and ROI? Your team can make or break you. Let me share some stats with you from an HBR article a couple of years ago. 81% of people say their team is not operating anywhere near its full potential. 74% don't agree that their team is accountable for shared goals. And 71% report that team members aren't committed to elevating each other by offering constructive feedback. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot of research out there that indicative of the fact that if your team isn't effective, it can really impact your bottom line and your top line.
Yeah, in your work, Kathryn, it sounds like you help organizations to build these successful teams. And I'm sure you have a framework of your own on what success looks like. Can you share some of those insights with us?
So I think when you think about what a highly effective team looks like, you really need to think about, is the output of your team meeting or exceeding the needs of the customer, right? And so it could be the end customer, or you could be in sales ops and maybe your end customer is the sales team, but are you meeting and exceeding the needs, right? Another thing is that, are the team members becoming increasingly capable over time? Are they performing as a unit over time? And are the team members' personal learning and growth fostered by their experiences on the team?
Yeah.
So if you have those three, then you have a strong team.
That's really interesting. You said personal learning. Can you expand on that a little bit more? What does that mean?
Are you, as an individual, learning and growing? Are you stretching? Are you getting those opportunities to grow your own personal development by being part of the team?
Yeah, absolutely, because that leads to engagement, right? We know that motivation is related to continuing to develop and grow over time. So if someone on the team is continuing to develop, they tend to be more engaged in the role, which I'm sure only provides positive impact to the rest of the team.
100%. Absolutely.
So when it comes to building great teams, Kathryn, you've come up with a framework, which is awesome, and you call it the 6 dimensions of success. Talk about those 6 dimensions with us briefly.
Yeah, I think the key to really understanding the 6 conditions of highly successful teams, and this is coming out of research from Harvard University, is that most people just observe the symptoms, right? I had someone I was talking to yesterday was telling me how their people are sidestepping, the real crux of an issue. They can't deliver feedback to each other. They're going around a situation. And so their initial thought was, hey, Kathryn, can you deliver a training on how to give constructive peer feedback? And I said, yes, I could, but that's not your real issue. The issue is the fact that people don't feel comfortable speaking to each other in a productive way, giving or receiving. So there's other issues, and that's one of the challenges I see that's most common in teams. But by diagnosing your team and understanding, do you have these conditions that will enable for a highly effective team, you can't overcome them. So I can talk a little bit more about those conditions based on that research. One is are you a real team, right? Does the team have interdependent work with clearly defined members? I don't know about you, but I worked at large companies and it's not always clear who's on the team and who's not on the team. So there can't be a bunch of dotted lines and people don't know who's reporting to who. So it has to be clearly defined and interdependent work. So that's the first one. The second is there a compelling purpose? And most organizations have a mission or organizational purpose. Most people know what their job description is, but there's no purpose for the team. And so how do you expect people to come together and work together in a meaningful way if they don't have a purpose? Right? And so it needs to be challenging and it has to be meaningful and it has to make a difference for the organization and the customers. I'm not saying it has to be sexy. I'm just saying it has to be, clearly defined and something that will move the needle for the customers. And you need to have the right people. And that means, diverse perspectives that can collaborate. And I limit it to 6 or 7. I used to work for Ken Chenault at American Express, and he used to say, your meeting shouldn't be any bigger than the amount of people that can reasonably share a pizza. Well, your teams shouldn't be either in terms of your direct reporting lines. So those are the essentials. Would it be useful to talk through some of the enablers?
Yeah.
Sure. So the next one is sound structure. And this is where I see a lot of teams getting tripped up in terms of the team norms. Let's make agreements on what we're going to do and what not to do when we work together. Something as simple as, how we're going to communicate. I had a team yesterday spend time just talking about, do we use Slack? Do we use email? Do we use Zoom? Do we go in person? Some of things can really create a lot of friction, particularly when you have a multi-generational team and everyone has different preferences. And so really being cognizant of the way that people prefer to communicate and being intentional about the team norms can be such a difference maker in the team. The next one, the fifth one, is supportive context. So this is having the influence to, upwards and outwards, block and tackle, as I like to say, providing resources, but also moving roadblocks and rewarding for team performance, giving the right data, and helping your team be able to articulate what they need and when, and what's the opportunity cost of not getting that. So often I have leaders that tell me that their team's not giving them the information they need so that they can go fight for what they need as a team. And lastly, I would say coaching, and I'm not just tooting my own horn, the team leader can do this as well, but it's someone who's paying attention to the team's processes and using and intervening to make better use of the resources to help get things done.
That's very interesting. Really interesting framework. You talked a lot about purpose. You talked about bringing in diverse perspectives, bringing in structure, having a supportive context, providing coaching. Like these sound like really solid contributions to creating a great team. So how does someone know in the midst of it, as a leader, like what is something a symptom? Is there a root problem? Like when you talk to your potential customers, how do they diagnose the situation?
It's a great question, April. And I did not pay April to say this. I actually have a free assessment on my website you can take to say, hey, how are you doing against these different dimensions? And, that I'm happy to have a conversation. I have a lot of resources on my website as well. What do you do when you don't measure up the way that you think? But a lot of times it's, hearing people, if you start hearing yourself say, hey, people aren't stepping up the way they anticipated, or they're not talking to each other. We can't seem to make a decision. Where there's just signs of, maybe dysfunction or lack of engagement, there's something else going on there. Like the example with the feedback, it's not just people don't know how to give feedback. It's the fact that there's no psychological safety. There's no agreements of norms of how they should be communicating with each other.
Yeah. Kathryn, what do you see as like some of the big barriers to teams working on these or leaders working on these to try to get it right? What's getting in their way or holding them back?
I think a lot of times leaders are working in the business versus on the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, they're focusing on selling, they're focused on getting the projects done, they're focusing on helping their team win, quote unquote, but they're not being intentional about the team's culture. They're not being intentional about these conditions, and it'll happen with or without you. I had a client who took over the family business, if you will, and he was very hesitant to name himself as the leader of the organization. But newsflash, everyone saw him as the leader anyway. And so we had a meeting with some of his key leaders that he identified. Funny enough, none of them actually knew that they were the key leaders. They had never been in a room together before. And so that's more of an egregious example. But my point is, either you can be intentional about it or it's going to happen without you. So create the space and time to create the team that you want to lead and be the leader that you wish you had.
So let's say they do focus on it and they're intentional about it and they do it very well. What does it look like when they get it right?
Well, let me ask you this. Think about the time when you were on a really bad team. How did you feel? It could be at school, it could be at work, it could be your softball team. It feels pretty crappy. But think about when you're on that great team, that best team. You're excited to go to work. You're excited to show up. You are able to produce. The team's able to produce more than you thought you'd be able to. It's a place that everyone wants to be around and be a part of. That is what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to that best team.
Mm-hmm. And with engagement struggles so difficult, talent so hard to recruit and keep, this should be something that should be top of every leader's list, right?
Absolutely. And I think that because folks are under so much pressure, it's hard sometimes to see the forest for the trees. And I'm guilty of it as well. And that's why I have my own coach, right? Because I can't do it for myself. I need a third party to help me and my team to become more effective.
Yeah. Talk about the importance of coaching, Kathryn, because I know that's one of the key enablers, the final one that you listed of the three. We're seeing that as a big deficit, particularly in sales, where and opportunity as well. Companies that get coaching right seem to be dramatically exceeding goals. Companies that don't have great coaches, great first level managers that are coaching rather than just kind of asking about the forecast and beating everyone over the head for deal closes. Talk about coaching, particularly in sales.
Well, I think back to my time as a salesperson. So I, carried a bag for about 10 years, and what makes someone a great salesperson doesn't always translate into being a great sales leader. And I think most listeners out there can identify the differences. And, there's a saying by Marshall Goldsmith, who's a famous coach: what got you here won't get you there. He actually wrote a book on it. And a lot of times the skills of being a leader are not being trained. They're not being taught. And also, if they are, they're in a 2-day session and then, it's set it and forget it. And then it's not applied on the job. And that's what coaching does. Is it's a neutral third party, it's confidential, and it's a way for you to learn and grow on the job and to make you better.
And you talked about purpose earlier, from the perspective of the purpose of the team, which is separate from the purpose of the organization. It's like a microcosm within, it's a unit, and probably has their own culture and own dynamic. So how can a leader help to develop that sense of purpose for a team?
What I would think about is asking your team, what does it look like when we're doing our best work, right? What's the impact we have on our customers? As sales organizations, you're probably talking to your customers quite often, but think about that avatar, that ideal customer. What's the impact that you're making? And if you're not in a sales team, think about that internal customer. I've actually had internal customers come talk to the teams to say, this is what it means to my team if you all show up at your best. So it's really sharing and giving people something tangible of what to strive for and what the impact is on those around them.
That makes a lot of sense, because I think deep down everyone wants to make a difference. And so even, no matter what your role is or how disconnected it is from the target customer, it could be an internal team, and to be able to represent that you're making an impact for another person can provide that purpose for the team.
Absolutely. Accounting has a purpose, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's great for the accountants to hear, as salespeople, we don't think accounting's that exciting, but it's great for the accountants to hear how their work can make an impact on the salespeople, and for the and vice versa, so that people feel enthusiastic and they feel like they have skin in the game. There's a reason why they're here outside of just the money, although the money helps too.
Kathryn, what's the one piece of advice you'd like to leave our Enterprise Value Collective with today?
Yeah, I would encourage you to go to my website, download the complimentary assessment, and see how your team stacks up. It's really easy to do. It take you about 5 minutes, and you find out your team's not measuring up the way you thought. Look me up. I'm happy to help. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'd be really happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, Kathryn publishes great information and content, so definitely take advantage of the free content that she provides and give her a call if the teams are not functional. Kathryn, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So please sign up if you haven't done so yet for the Enterprise Value Collective on LinkedIn or our geniusdrive.com website. Stay in touch with us on the latest events, tools, research, insights. If you like this episode, hit the like button, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. And until next time, our Enterprise Value Collective, keep sharing and growing together.